Welcome back to this series of Dark Reading Tech Talks. Terry Sweeney here, contributing editor to Dark Reading, and joining me is Justin Fear, Director of Cyber Intelligence and Analysis for Darktrace. Justin, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
We are talking about endpoint security, and that's at least in these pandemic times, often a code word for working from home, which has expanded the threat surface exponentially, I think it's fair to say. That's also a bit of a 30,000-foot view. Take us down on the ground and break this down for us a bit about why endpoint security is such a hot topic these days.
Yeah, I think it always has been in our industry. I mean, as the endpoint is what we do most of our work on, but I think you nailed it on the head. I mean, what is an endpoint in today's day and age? I'm sitting in my home office surrounded by IoT devices and other devices that may or may not be communicating, or at the minimum on the same network with my endpoint. And I think it also highlights that other kind of thing that disappeared during all this, and that's the perimeter, or the traditional perimeter. Usually our endpoints were on the inside, and now there is no perimeter. So we have to look at protecting the endpoint in a different way, I think, moving forward.
With that in mind, what are you seeing with regard to where companies and organizations are getting endpoint security wrong? What are some of the common pitfalls?
I think the most obvious, and I'm sure all the listeners have heard this before, is just legacy security cannot be used anymore. You know, we need to think a little bit differently. I'm not saying we should do away with endpoint by no means, but using rules and signatures, using just known attacks is certainly not going to be a way forward. There's really been some great changes within the endpoint space. Even Darktrace is getting into the endpoint space as well. And I think you're going to start to see that shift, as the endpoint has changed. Just as one example, we've started to see some more browser-based security, as a lot of our customers are using more SaaS-related protocols. Some are even migrating completely to Chrome OS and other browser-based operating systems. And that really changes the whole dynamic of, using EDR solutions. So I truly think organizations just should start with having the discussion of what is an endpoint, how do we protect it, and what do we want to get out of that endpoint security product?
Great, that's helpful context. Talk, if you would, a bit about what Darktrace is doing in endpoint security to address some of these challenges.
Yeah, I think so. One of the most exciting parts about what we're doing in endpoint is out of band visibility. As I mentioned before, our endpoints are no longer in our corporate office. They're at home. A lot of times we can't see them unless they're connected to the VPN. Some organizations take the more aggressive route of always on VPN. You literally can't do anything unless that VPN is connected, but the majority don't. And so Darktrace's endpoint agent has the ability to still monitor even when you're not connected to the VPN. Our customers still have the ability to watch those devices when they're traveling with us all over the place, logging in from different places, even when I'm not connected back to that network. And that, I think, is one area you're going to see a lot more expansion to. The other thing that we do a little bit differently is just marrying up the endpoint related data with all that other data that we're collecting, the network related traffic, the SaaS traffic, the email traffic, and stitching it all together. So it's not enough to just say, I saw the strange email come in, but I saw the strange email come in. Sadly, my user clicked the link. And then 9 hours later, I saw the endpoint start doing things that it had never done before. And that's one of the areas that I think you'll start to see more expansion in the endpoint space. So yeah, we're really excited about our new endpoint offering. And we're also integrating with a number of other EDR solutions that are out there that most of our customers are using.
Talk a bit, I mean, it seems related that the industry conversation around zero trust, which has become basically center stage in the last, let's say, 30 months. This also dovetails nicely there. Can you assess the impact of zero trust with regard to endpoint security?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to have a huge say in what that next generation of endpoint security looks like. I would agree with you. I've attended a number of, briefings and conferences from the U.S. government, and that is the number one focus from the Fed right now, is just getting all their systems at some level of zero trust. I will be honest and transparent with all the users. even I am not versed enough to talk about zero trust. And that is one worry or complaint I have. Everybody's got a different definition of what zero trust is. And it would be nice to see some standardization of what zero trust is and then start to see some implementation. But I'm glad we're having the conversation. And I do truly think that is kind of the future, of a lot of our industry. How long it's going to be before that implementation happens is a great question. But obviously, we've seen, in the last 2 years with the pandemic, digital transformation happened overnight. So, it might happen a lot quicker than many of us think.
Well, while you've got your crystal ball out, tell us what you see with regard to the future of endpoint security. What do you see coming down the pike there?
Well, so first and foremost, I think, we have to talk about geopolitics right now. The world is still a crazy place, but there's a lot happening, of course, with the Russia-Ukraine situation. I think you really should focus a lot on that. Just in the last 12 hours, there was news reports of not ransomware, but ransomware disguised as a wiper. And I think we need to start looking at some of the defensive actions that nation states might start taking as things continue to escalate. So I think I would advise everybody watch what CISA is putting out alert-wise. They're not putting those alerts out just for the sake of putting them out. It's usually because they have some form of intelligence, and that's their way of sharing it with the community. And so I'd say all eyes are kind of on the situation of what's happening there. And I think you could really use it as a foreshadowing tool. I think a lot of what's going to happen there will eventually migrate over to our soil at some point.
Well, countries as endpoints. I hadn't really thought of it that way, but you raise a great point.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I am a little worried about that, but as I said before, I think we've done a lot and learned a lot in the last 12 months on, securing things and backing up systems and deploying things a little bit differently. But for me, I think it's most interesting to see how organizations are changing. There was another great story about a hospital that thwarted an attack recently, and they migrated everything over to Chrome OS. And that's how they were able to get up and running very, very quickly. And so I think that is one of the areas you're going to start to see. I think the traditional endpoint will start to slowly go away. And you're going to start to see more and more creative ways to keep business operating with different tools that we might not have thought about in the enterprise in the past.
Justin, thanks for joining us for this Dark Reading Tech Talk. Appreciate the context and perspective you bring. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.